Well, after months of anticipation and waiting, it finally happened. Day one of the 2015 NFL Draft. How exciting, and how exciting it is every year. Now, personally, I don't think this is the most exciting first round I've seen, and it's nowhere close to that, but there's still always a special feeling, a buzz, an aura around draft weekend. To me, it is the dominant sports event. It's one of my favorite things of the sporting calendar every single year, beyond question. And I figured now that day one is officially in the books, it's time to talk about some of the biggest winners, losers, and maybe surprises or questionable things that I saw out of this day one of the 2015 NFL Draft. And I'm going to go to the winners first. Sometimes the toughest thing to do in an NFL draft is to do the sensible thing, to set out, identify a guy, set a plan, and then execute and stick to that plan and take that guy that you had visions on all along. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Tennessee Titans did just that. They didn't outthink themselves. They didn't get too cute. They did their due diligence. They weighed all their options, and at the end of the day, they did the most sensible things for each of their organizations. The Bucs selecting Jameis Winston number 1 overall, and then the Tennessee Titans selecting Marcus Mariota number 2 overall. Not Mariota, Commissioner Goodell. But when you look at the Buccaneers, they wanted that drop back type of prototypical NFL passer, and that's the type of guy that Jameis Winston is, a guy with franchise quarterback written all over him in spite of some of the flaws. And then you look at the Tennessee Titans, with all the talk about them potentially wanting to trade that pick and all the buzz about them trading that pick, perhaps more buzz about trading of any pick in the top 5 of a draft that I've ever seen. I mean, it was just crazy, the amount of different rumors that were going on about the Tennessee Titans and what they were going to do at number 2. And at the end of the day, they weighed all their options, and they did the sensible thing. They did the right thing. They took Marcus Mariota because, as I've mentioned before, it is not a fluke. It is not an opinion. It is a statistical fact. In the National Football League, there are 2 types of teams, those that have a quarterback and those that don't. And you also know that is a statistical fact that in order to be a consistent championship contending team, and more importantly, win a championship in today's NFL, you must draft your quarterback. This is not an opinion. This is a statistical fact. And for the Tennessee Titans to have taken a package of picks and players to move out of 2 and miss out on Mariota, a guy who I think is the number 1 quarterback and the number 1 player in this 2015 NFL draft, would have been foolish. Because as much as everybody likes to praise the Rams for what they did in the RG3 trade 3 years ago, where the hell are the Rams? 3 years later, they've got Nick Foles and a bunch of 6-10 records to show for it. I mean, seriously, they're still looking for that quarterback. They're still looking for that guy. Sometimes the toughest thing to do is the most sensible thing, but the Tennessee Titans did just that. They needed an identity. They needed a face of the franchise, similar to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and both teams deserve tremendous kudos for doing the right thing for their organization. But who else were winners on draft night in day number 1? I look at the Oakland Raiders. You've got Derek Carr. You think Derek Carr is going to be that guy. He showed you some flashes in 2014. You have to get him help. I know some Raiders fans and some people maybe believe in the media that they should have taken Leonard Williams. Here's a kid that would have been in his disruptive interior pass rushing force for Jack Del Rio's defense. And, he was a Raiders fan as a kid. He wanted to play for Oakland. But the bottom line is Cooper made more sense. Cooper was the right guy for the right team at the right pick. This is the second year in a row that I think the Oakland Raiders hit a big home run with their first-round pick. And for as many people that are talking about Amari Cooper as the number 1 wide receiver in this draft and is a top 5 talent, and I don't quite think that. I view him more as the number 3 best receiver in this class and maybe a top 10 to 15 guy. This is still a really good player, still a really good wide receiver. It's going to be a very, very productive NFL player. How are you going to knock the Raiders for taking a number 1 wide receiver in this draft? Because Amari Cooper will be a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. I assure you of that. How are you going to knock them for that? I will take a number 1 wide receiver or over a disruptive defensive tackle any day of the week. Beyond question. The Raiders hit it out of the park, as did the Chicago Bears. Now, I was excited to hear the late buzz about them trying to move up to number 2 to get the Titans pick so they could get Mariota. They were trying to throw Cutler in the deal. Good luck with that. You're stuck with that asshole because you made yourself stuck with that asshole. But either way, for all the talk about them having to take defense, and that defense was a big need, at the end of the day, people that are saying that are idiots. This is a team that went 5-11 last year because all sides of the ball sucked. That was defense and offense. This is also a team that has devoted 2 of their top 3 draft picks in the past 6 NFL drafts to the defensive side of the ball. How much more top pick investment can you put on the defensive side of the ball before you sit there and start to wonder what's going on with the offense? And when you look at the board at what had transpired, Fowler was off the board. Leonard Williams is off the board. And at this point in time, you've got Kevin White, a guy who profiles as the number one wide receiver at the NFL level, a top 5 player on my draft board, the number one wide receiver in this class, in my opinion. He's sitting there at 7. You must take him. Can you sit there and tell me honestly that you think Vic Beasley is that superior of a prospect to a guy like Kevin White, and therefore you just have to take him? And can you even argue that a guy like Vic Beasley fills a bigger need than a Kevin White does? No, I don't think so. You don't have Brandon Marshall anymore. You traded him away. Alshon Jeffrey's entering a contract year. This is long-term insurance and short-term help. The Bears had to take Kevin White. The last time I think that I was truly this excited about a Bears first-round pick was Tommy Harris in 2004, and then even going back to before that, probably Urlacher in 2000. That's how good this pick was in my mind. And I look at the Cleveland Browns, too. I know a lot of people are going to sit there and say, why the hell didn't they take Devante Parker at number 12? I get it, and I understand it. And in a lot of ways, maybe they should have. But, man, their run defense was absolutely terrible last year. And you play in a division where you have to face Le'Veon Bell twice a year. You know the Baltimore Ravens are going to be able to run the ball with Justin Forsett. You know you've got Jeremy Hill and Gio Bernard in Cincinnati. You've got to be able to stop the run in the AFC North. So getting a guy like Danny Shelton, a guy who's a really good run stuffer, but is more than that and is not just a two-down player at number 12, I thought was pretty good value and made a world of sense. As did taking Cameron Erving at number 19. Now, granted, I do think his best position long-term in the NFL is at center, but in the meantime, he's a guy who could potentially play one of the guard positions. He might force you to flip Mitchell Schwartz inside to guard in his contract year, and Erving can play right tackle. He also provides you long-term insurance because Alex Mack can potentially opt out of his contract after 2015. The Browns needed to address the trenches on both sides of the ball, and that's exactly what they did, and I think they deserve kudos for that, not knocking, especially because this is another wide receiver class that is really good and really deep. The Browns should be able to find themselves some help in day 2 of the draft at the wide receiver position. If they don't, then you know what? Feel free to blast away in the Browns. And then you got the New England Patriots. They stay at 32. Malcom Brown falls into their lap. You know, as it happened, and they announced the pick, it reminded me of is when Vince Wilfork dropped to him at pick 21 in 2004. Vince Wilfork, to me, at that time, was clearly a top 10 guy in that draft. I think most people felt the same way. And he just drops. And then the defending Super Bowl champions get a stud like him. And you saw what he did for a decade in New England. Malcom Brown maybe could be that same type of guy. Some of the biggest surprises or questions I have in terms of picks. Brandon Scherff to the Redskins at 5. You know, I actually mocked them taking Scherff, and I agree with the Redskins addressing the offensive side of the ball, in particular the offensive line. I just don't think Brandon Scherff was the best offensive line prospect, and I don't think you should be spending a top 5 pick, even in this draft, on an offensive guard. Just my opinion. The New York Jets taking Leonard Williams at number 6. Now, I know a lot of people are infatuated with this pick because they say, my God, this is tremendous value. The Jets stuck true to their board, took the best available player. This guy should have been the number 1 or number 2 pick. I've always felt that Leonard Williams was a little bit overrated by the draft media. In fact, I think Danny Shelton graded out better as a prospect for me than Leonard Williams. Furthermore, when you're talking about the Jets, yeah, maybe they were between a rock and a hard place, and maybe based off of the way the board fell, you know, maybe this was a situation they had and they had to take it, and they've got some issues in terms of what they're going to do with Muhammad Wilkerson long-term in terms of contract. But they've had 7 first-round picks since 2010, 7 of them. And they yet again took another defensive player. And in this case, it wasn't even an edge rusher. If you're going to take a defensive player, maybe just take Vic Beasley here. Why would you take Leonard Williams? It's a lateral move. It's a neutral move. This is why you got rid of Mike Tannenbaum. This is why you got rid of John Idzik and then head coach Rex Ryan. It's because of dumb shit like this. And now a new regime does the same old shit. And yet people are praising this. I don't get it. I think Leonard Williams is a very good player. I think he's a good fit for what the Jets do on defense. But again, I think they're spinning their wheels and making a lateral move. They didn't address their biggest need on defense. And furthermore, for a team that has invested so many draft picks on the defensive side of the ball, why are you still continuing to do it in the first round? I look at the Rams taking Todd Gurley at number 10. To me, a clear-cut case of best player available on the board. And that's hard to knock. But I look at the Rams, too, and I say, well, who's going to catch the ball outside? Who's going to block for Nick Foles up front? You know, Gurley is one of those things that It's a bit of a luxury pick because I thought Trey Mason played pretty well in his opportunities last year. I understand what the Rams were going for, having seen what Frank Gore can do, having seen what Marshawn Lynch can do in their division. I understand it and I get it. I was just a bit surprised that it was the Rams that took Todd Gurley. I wasn't surprised that he went in the top 10, as I talk about every year. Usually you get to 9, 10, and 11. That's where you start to get kind of into the squirrely season, and a lot of crazy things can happen. And going there with Gurley at number 10, I thought was a big surprise, especially to the Rams. Andrews Pete going 13 to the Saints. With Devante Parker on the board and Bud Dupree on the board, I was really surprised about this one. Kevin Johnson on the board, I was surprised about this one. Now, maybe they think that Andrews Pete is going to be a long-term left tackle at the NFL level, and I agree. I think he will be. I just don't think it was the best option for them. I was surprised that Bud Dupree dropped out of the top 20. I really was. Caught me by surprise a little bit, but maybe it shouldn't have. I was surprised that the Steelers decided to take him at 22. Maybe they thought it was really good value, and I understand that. But, again, he doesn't play in your secondary. And your secondary has been so criminally neglected for so many years. And as much as the Steelers can talk about the fact that this is another guy that the board fell to them and now it's the same shit you said about Jarvis Jones back in 2013 and how's that worked out for you. Just saying. I was surprised at the Detroit Lions. Not so much that they took an offensive lineman, but that they took this offensive lineman, Laken Tomlinson, at number 28. Now, granted, I applaud them for getting some additional draft pick currency to move down from 23. But I do really question that they didn't take Malcom Brown. Because it was not just a big need and a bigger need than offensive guard, but I think he was the better player. Now, I like Laken Tomlinson, and I do think the Lions' offensive line was a need and an underrated need. And as I talked about leading up to the draft, I wasn't going to be that surprised if the Lions did actually go offensive line in round 1. However, I would have thought more so that they would have maybe went offensive tackle. So I'm surprised maybe they didn't stay at 23 and take a guy like DJ Humphries. I like Tomlinson. He'll be a plug-and-play day one starter for them on the interior. Him and Warford will make a nice, scary guard combination. But, man, they passed on Malcom Brown. I don't know about all that. And then I was surprised that the Colts took Phillip Dorsett at number 29. I was, especially with Demarius Randall there. I thought that was going to be their guy. I was really surprised that a lot of people are knocking and questioning the Colts for this because on the one hand, we sit there all the time and talk about best player available and not reaching for need. Well, clearly the Colts must have thought he was the best player available on the board, and they took him. You can sit there and talk about, well, they have needs on this part of the defense and that part of the defense. The Colts haven't done that bad in the draft in recent years. This is a team that has advanced further in the playoffs each of the past 3 years with Andrew Luck at the helm. Maybe they deserve a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, especially considering Andre Johnson may only be a one-year option in Indianapolis. On top of that, T.Y. Hilton is entering a contract year. Also, another thing when you're talking about maybe wanting to get over New England, all the talk about the defensive side of the ball and having to shore up the defense, maybe a way to get past them is score more points. Something the Colts haven't done very well against the Patriots. And having another quick, explosive weapon to be able to go up against that weak and depleted now New England secondary makes a bit of sense to me. So while I was surprised. Not that Dorsett went in the first round. I thought he should have. And it was just, I was surprised that he went to the Colts. I'll say that. Here are some of the biggest losers, though. I think first, NFL draft fans. We didn't get that exciting or captivating of a draft, frankly. You had 2 whole trades in the first round. Trades make it happen. And I think the draft really went down in excitement level once the realization came that the Titans were taking Mariota and no trade was going to happen. Because if that trade would have went down, all hell would have broken loose, and God only knows what could have happened. And imagine how much more exciting things would have been, especially in the aftermath of day number 1. In terms of losers, you got to look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They wanted Mariota, and they didn't get their guy. You can sit there and talk about Aguilar at 20 being a good fit for their system, and I agree that he is. I think his skill set works well for what Chip Kelly's offense does, even though I don't think Aguilar was worth a top 20 pick in this draft. With that said, though, again, they had their guy, and they didn't get their guy. And they're losers for that, especially because they're rolling into 2015 with Sam Bradford as their starting quarterback. I mean, come on, let's get serious here. The Cincinnati Bengals taking Cedric Ogbuehi, number 21. You had Shane Ray and Bud Dupree both on the board. I think both of those edge rushers were far better prospects than Cedric Ogbuehi. Both are more likely to contribute immediately than Cedric Ogbuehi. They were better value at that point in time and address much bigger needs than Cedric Ogbuehi. I didn't really get that one. You know, while the Bengals were in a bit of a situation where they could have taken best available player, you know, you have guys like Rashad Perryman and Phillip Dorsett on the board, two wide receivers that could have made a lot of sense for you, giving you a legit number 2 option opposite A.J. Green. Perhaps also some protection in case A.J. Green doesn't resign at some point in time. You know, you have those edge rushers like Ray and Dupree, and you take Cedric Obehi instead. I just kind of thought that was a miss. You look at the Arizona Cardinals, too. I mean, they missed out on the top 2 running backs in Gurley and Gordon. And then at 24, they took DJ Humphries. You had needs at edge rusher. You had needs on the defensive line. You had needs at corner. And you took DJ Humphries. You know, maybe it was just more of a surprise or a question for me than maybe flat-out losers. But the fact is they had a big-time need at the running back position, and they lost maybe in part because both Gordon and Gurley were drafted early and drafted in the top half of round number 1, which makes the running back position big-time winners. If you think about it, not only were 2 running backs taken in the first round, but 2 running backs were taken in the top 16, and one of them at 15 and the other one in the top 10. And the Cardinals missed out on that. It was partially out of their control, but it is what it is. And then you got to look at guys like Shane Ray and Lyle Collins and Randy Gregory. Now, Shane Ray ultimately got drafted, but based off of his own stupidity, he cost himself a lot of guaranteed money. Lyle Collins, we don't really know. Could have cost himself everything over his own stupidity, or it could be much ado about nothing, and he's a victim of bad timing and circumstance, and he lost a ton of money. And then you look at Randy Gregory, due to different concerns, including his own decision-making and stupidity, cost himself potentially a ton of money. And when you talk about losers, when you're talking about guys that lose millions and millions of guaranteed dollars throughout the draft process, especially late, they might end up being the biggest losers of all when it comes to day 1 of the 2015 NFL Draft. So feel free. I couldn't cover every team in this video. There are other things I liked and didn't like about this draft, but these were the things that were most notable to me. So feel free in the comment section of this video or tweet me at pfspot_schlegel on Twitter who you thought the biggest winners and losers and what the biggest surprises and questions you have were about day 1 of the 2015 NFL Draft.